Tycoon stunned as pregnant ex-wife passes out in public. The aftermath surprises all. A hush falls over the grand ballroom as Alejandro Kong steps out from behind the heavy velvet curtain. 100 spotlights split the air, igniting his tailored charcoal suit in a constellation of flickering light. His heart thuds against his ribs, each beat echoing the weight of every expectation he's carried since he inherited Kong Industries. He lifts his chin, eyes narrowing as the sea of faces before him blurs under the glare of cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice calm but threaded with steel. "Thank you for joining me tonight." A polished smile curves his lips, but inside, a tempest churns. On the surface, he is the consummate tycoon, unshakable, omnipotent. Yet beneath the facade, there is a loneliness as vast as the skyscraper he built from ashes and ambition. He pauses, allowing the applause to wash over him, tasting its hollow sweetness. Somewhere backstage, his assistant whispers, "Mr. Kong, your next slide is ready." The words slice through him like a blade. He spent his life forging empires of code and capital, but no algorithm, no merger, no boardroom conquest has ever filled the void he carries. Tonight, he continues, voice softer now, we embark on a new chapter. Technology must serve humanity, not the other way around. He clicks the remote. Behind him, an image blooms. A child's drawing of a family, crayon-stroked and fragile. A gasp ripples through the audience. In that moment, Alejandro's chest tightens. He remembers the face behind those childish lines. Valeria's smile, the gentle curve of her hand resting against her belly. Their future, once mapped in dreams, lies shattered somewhere beyond this stage. He shuts out the applause and the swirling lights, closing his eyes for a breath. When he opens them, his gaze locks on a single point in the crowd, an empty seat reserved for her. He senses the absence like a phantom limb. "We must remember," he says, voice raw with an emotion he rarely allows himself to display. "What matters most is not profit margin, but the hearts we touch." A murmur spreads, disbelief mingling with admiration. Alejandro swallows, the polished veneer slipping. In this moment, he is not the master of the corporate realm, but a man haunted by a promise he once broke. As he steps away from the podium, the curtain falls behind him, and the roar of cameras crescendos. His pulse races, partly from triumph, partly from regret. Backstage, his assistant hovers. "Are you all right?" she asks. He exhales, nodding slowly. "Yes," he whispers, though the word tastes like ashes. "I'm exactly where I need to be." "More milk in the latte," she murmured to herself, remembering Alejandro's favorite order. Double shot, velvety foam. Her heart ached at the memory. Laughter shared over steaming mugs, the warmth of his presence beside her. Now, the hum of the espresso machine was her only companion. A clatter at the door jolted her back to reality. She forced a smile at the man who shuffled in, rainwater beating on his coat. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice soft but steady. She poured the latte, artfully tracing a leaf in the foam. The customer nodded, paid, and left without a word. Valeria watched him go, as lonely as a shadow slipping through the rain. Her breathing caught as she straightened a stack of sugar packets, a sharp pang in her side reminding her of the life growing within. 3 months. 3 months of concealed panic and quiet joy. She placed a hand on her belly, closing her eyes. "I'm here, little one," she whispered. "We'll make it." Footsteps in the back corridor made her start. Her coworker, Mina, peeked around the door. "Val, you okay? You look a bit pale." Concern laced her tone. Valeria offered a wan smile. "Just tired today." She forced herself to nod. Mina hesitated, then touched her arm. "You should rest. Sit down for a bit." Valeria's throat clenched. She longed to collapse into a soft chair instead of standing under these harsh lights. "I can't," she said, voice breaking. "There's too much to do." Behind the cafe window, a black sedan rolled past, its tinted windows hiding whoever might be inside. Valeria's breath stuttered. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, feeling a surge of dread. Had someone recognized her? Rumors of Alejandro's return had circulated online, tabloids showing old wedding photos, accusing him of abandoning her and the unborn child. Minutes later, the door chimed again. She turned to see a stranger leaning against the threshold, camera in hand. "Valeria Suarez?" he asked, voice low and eager. Before she could respond, his lens clicked repeatedly. "Are you still living here? How does it feel, abandoned by the Tycoon?" Her heart thundered. She backed away, clutching her apron like a shield. "Please, I don't want this," she whispered, panic tipping into fury. The camera flashed again, and the cafe's warm cocoon ruptured under the harsh glare of unwanted attention. As the man approached, Mina intervened, stepping between them. "You can't do this here," she snapped. The paparazzo shrugged, slipping the camera into his coat. "Your story's news. People want to know." Valeria's vision blurred. The fluorescent lights became halos around her head, each one stabbing at her skull. She tried to steady herself against the counter, but the world tilted. The last thing she saw was Mina's alarmed face before darkness swallowed her. When she came to, the cafe had emptied. Rain pattered on the pavement outside, distant sirens wailing like a warning. Valeria's cheek pressed against the cool tile floor, every breath a struggle. Panic bloomed in her chest. Was the baby okay? The ache returned, sharper this time. She attempted to lift herself up but collapsed back, cold seeping through her dress. "Be careful," someone laughed, but the laughter cut through the pitch-black room like a blade. She stumbled and warm hands caught. Her strong, certain. He guided her back to solid ground, the air electric with adrenaline and something new, something thrilling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. He smiled, voice low and gentle. "It's my fault. I should have watched where I was going." He offered his hand. "I'm Alejandro Kong." Her heart pounded. "Valeria Suarez." She shook his hand and felt a spark as bright as lightning. In that instant, everything else vanished. The shadows, the dripping ceiling, leaving only the pull between them. They found themselves side by side under a single lantern on the terrace, rain spattering like applause. He brushed a lock of hair from her face, and his fingers lingered at her temple. "You're beautiful," he said, breath hushed. The words were simple, yet they tumbled into her chest and lodged there. She wondered if he knew how dangerous they were. Over the next months, their worlds interwove. He showed her the back corridors of his company's lab, where robots took shape in silent rows. She introduced him to her grandmother's homemade empanadas, teaching him to fold dough just right. Each sunrise became a promise. He would finish a deal, then rush to her apartment. She would rehearse a speech for class, then slip out to surprise him at the office. One evening, on the rooftop of his skyscraper, they watched the city lights bloom below. He held her close, whispering plans of a shared future. A home filled with laughter, children's footsteps echoing down the hallway. She closed her eyes, imagining tiny socks on hardwood floors, a cradle by the window. But somewhere between grand visions and boardroom battles, the pressure seeped in. His board demanded focus. His investors grew restless. Whispers followed him through marble halls. A tycoon cannot afford distractions. Valeria felt the distance before she saw it in his eyes, a flicker of doubt replacing the warmth she had come to crave. One night, after a particularly brutal meeting, he returned to her, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. She pressed a hand to his arm. "You're late," she said, hurt trailing through her words. He looked at her, gaze skirting away. "Valeria, we need to talk." Her chest tightened. "Talk? Now?" He exhaled, every syllable weighed by regret. "This isn't working. I can't divide myself. My world, it demands everything." Tears burned her eyes. "So what, because your board doesn't approve, you just walk away? What about us? What about your promises?" He turned away, hands clenching at his sides. "I have to protect what I've built. And right now, that means focus. I'm sorry." His voice cracked, but he didn't look back. She reached for him as he stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, and the abyss between them swallowed her outstretched hand. The city lights blinked cold through the glass, and Valeria knew, with a pain sharper than any blade, that her heart was breaking. The cafe ceiling above her flickered back to life as a stream of daylight filtered through the window. Footsteps approached. Mina's voice broke through the haze. "Valeria, please answer me." She blinked, confusion blurring with the ache in her side. The memory receded, leaving a hollow thrum where hope once lived. The cafe was quiet now. Mina knelt beside her, hand pressed against her back. Valeria's chest loosened and tightened with each breath. "Can you stand?" Mina asked softly. Valeria tried to nod, but the world still rocked. She closed her eyes for a moment, tasting the resonance of old promises, and found only echoes. Opening them, she focused on the concerned face before her. The present pressed insistently against her mind. "Val," Mina said softly, eyes fixed on the cracked windshield. "You shouldn't have been alone in the cafe. What were you thinking?" Valeria's eyelashes fluttered. "I needed to work. Rent doesn't pause because I'm pregnant." Her voice caught on the last word. Pregnant. So heavy with both pride and fear that it felt like a confession whispered into a storm. Mina's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You can't do this by yourself. You need help, medical checkups, rest, someone to lean on." Valeria closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. "I know." She opened them, fixing Mina with a steady gaze. "But I won't be a charity case. I want to stand on my own feet. For the baby." Mina nodded, but worry creased her brow. "I'll come with you to appointments." Valeria offered a small, weary smile. "Thank you." Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the same rain-slick streets, Alejandro Kong stared out at his empire in miniature. The neon grid of traffic lights seemed a mockery of the bright dreams he once shared with Valeria. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, fatigue and something deeper, regret, pulling at him. His phone buzzed. "CFO, morning briefing in 10. He thumbed away the alert. Profits, projections, press releases, it was all part of the machine he had built to shield himself from vulnerability. Yet the echo of Valeria's whispered plea in the cafe haunted him more than any boardroom. He turned from the window and strode to his leather sofa, where a single folder lay, unmarked save for his handwriting. Family Matters. Inside were articles, social media clippings, hospital records. He'd asked his assistant to compile everything on Valeria's pregnancy and financial state. He felt the sting of intrusion the instant he opened the first page. His reflection in the glass coffee table fractured into shards of ambition and guilt. What did he truly want? The accolades of the business world, or to make amends for the wound he'd left in the one person who mattered? He closed the folder and dialed his assistant. "Cancel the investor call. I need time to review something else." Her voice stuttered in surprise, then obeyed. He sank into the sofa, head in hands, and murmured to the empty room, "I don't know if I can fix this." A week later, Valeria sat in a cramped examination room, the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling, with her own anxiety. Mina hovered by her side as the doctor reviewed the ultrasound images. "These measurements are good," he said, voice clinical but kind. "Baby's heartbeat is strong." Valeria let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Relief warmed her chest. Mina squeezed her hand. "See? Everything's okay." Valeria nodded, but doubt lingered. "And I'm still on my feet, right?" The doctor smiled. "Just listen to your body. Rest when you need to." As Mina helped her into a wheelchair, Valeria's thoughts drifted to Alejandro. If only he cared enough to call, to show he remembered the sound of her heartbeat, the way her hair caught sunlight. The coffee shop collapse had been a wake-up call. Her life was no longer just hers. Back in his penthouse, Alejandro reviewed his next move. He drafted a message to Valeria. "I'm sorry. I want to help." He deleted it. Then, "I need to explain." Deleted again. Each keystroke was a test of will. Could he reclaim the man who once whispered promises under lantern light? Or would he remain the distant tycoon who valued empire over empathy? His phone buzzed again. A news alert. "Exclusive. Ex-Tycoon's pregnant ex in public scare. The headline blared at him like a verdict. He swiped the notification, scanning the article. Paparazzi images of Valeria crumpled in the cafe, one hand over her belly, the other reaching for help. His chest constricted. A single tear slid down his cheek, almost invisible against his suit's crisp line. He stood abruptly. "Get my car ready," he ordered the assistant who materialized in the hallway. That afternoon, Valeria stepped out of the clinic and into a gray corridor of taxis. Mina hesitated. "Do you want me to drive you home?" Valeria shook her head. "No, I need to clear my head." She summoned a cab. As the vehicle pulled away, she pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the city's reflections blur into streaks. Her heart thudded with two competing truths. She needed security for her child, and yet feared dependence on the man who had already let her down once. A sleek black sedan eased beside her cab. Through the open window, she caught a glimpse of familiar eyes, steely, remorseful. The car idled, engine low. Her breath caught. Was this a trick of her imagination? Or had Alejandro come at last with words she both longed for and dreaded? Inside the sedan, Alejandro stared at her retreating form. His fingers curled around the steering wheel as if cradling her hand. The world narrowed to that one choice. Stay separated in pride and fear, or bridge a chasm with a single courageous act. He pressed a call button. The glass between them slid down. "Valeria," he called, voice urgent but gentle. Her head snapped up. Time slowed as their eyes locked, hers wide with shock, his heavy with apology. The cab lurched forward, then stopped as if reality itself waited. Valeria's pulse hammered in her ears. She hesitated, torn between retreat and the fragile hope that his arrival signaled something real. Behind her, Mina's anxious silhouette remained in the clinic doorway, but Valeria could only focus on the man in the car. "Please," his voice cracked, "let me prove that I can be different, for you and for our baby." Silence stretched between them, taut as a drawn bow. The drizzle glittered like diamonds on the pavement, and Valeria felt the weight of every decision she'd made, and every choice still to come. "Please," he said again, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Let me come with you." She swallowed, throat dry. Every memory of his departure flooded her mind. The hollow ache when the elevator doors closed, the way his promise had turned to smoke. And yet her heart trembled at the sound of his voice, the raw vulnerability there. "What do you want from me, Alejandro?" she whispered, wariness edged with longing. "More headlines? Another photo op?" He shook his head, rain dripping from the brim of his coat. "No, I need to do this right. For you. For our baby." He swallowed hard. "I built walls around myself to protect my company. But I see now. Those same walls trapped me away from you." Valeria's breath hitched. "You think words change anything? You walked away when I needed you most." Tension coiled in the space between them. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, casting long shadows. Then he took a step closer, pressing a trembling hand against the cab's glass. "I know," he admitted, voice cracking. "I was afraid that if I stayed, I'd lose control, lose my edge. But I was wrong. You gave me something no boardroom ever could." Her lip quivered. She remembered the first time he'd called her beautiful, the way his eyes had lingered on her profile as though he were discovering a masterpiece. But in the absence of those moments, she'd built her own fortress of survival. A single mother fighting for rent, dignity, and a future. "Show me," she challenged softly. "Prove it." Alejandro's jaw tightened. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, gathering courage, then opened them with a fierceness she'd never seen before. "Come with me," he said. "Get out of the cab." She stared at him, disbelief warring with desperation. Behind her, the city's neon reflections danced on the wet asphalt, life carrying on, indifferent. But here, now, everything felt suspended, as if the world awaited her answer. Slowly, she lifted her hand from the handle and pressed her palm against the cold glass. "Why should I trust you?" she murmured. He exhaled, the steam of his breath fogging the window. He drew a folded envelope from his pocket and pressed it against the glass, rain smudging the elegant script on its surface. "Because I've arranged everything," he said. "A place for you to live, near the clinic. You won't pay a cent. I've set up regular medical care, and I've hired someone to help with chores. Someone you choose. No cameras, no press, just help." Valeria's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to his face. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The offer was generous, too generous almost, but beneath the offer lay something more. A recognition of her worth, a willingness to carry her burdens alongside her. He brushed a droplet of water from her cheek with his thumb. A simple, intimate gesture that cracked open something deep inside her. "I don't want your charity," she whispered, lips trembling. "I want partnership, respect, honesty." He nodded, lips curving into a small, resolute smile. "Then let me earn it," he pleaded. "Not as a tycoon, as the man who loves you." His voice was thick with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes, Valeria. I'll learn. I'll listen. I'll protect you. But you have to let me try." Silence settled around them, broken only by the soft hiss of rain and the distant wail of sirens. Valeria closed her eyes, letting the promise of his words wash over her. She thought of the tiny life stirring within her, the spark of hope that had sustained her through dark days. And she thought of the emptiness she'd felt the moment he walked away, and of the possibility that, this time, he might stay. When she opened her eyes, the hard lines of doubt had softened. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "Get out of the car," she said. His face lit with relief as he pushed the door open. She slipped out of the cab, the damp asphalt cool beneath her feet. With each step toward him, her heart pounded, afraid that this could shatter at any moment, yet unwilling to turn back. He wrapped an arm around her, gentle as a whisper, and guided her to the passenger seat of his sedan. As she closed the door, her gaze met his in the rearview mirror, two souls trembling on the edge of a new beginning. The car pulled away from the curb, headlights slicing through the twilight. Inside, Valeria unwrapped the envelope. The key fell into her hand, heavy with promise. Alejandro reached across, his fingers brushing hers. "I'll drive," he said softly. She took a tentative step inside. "It's perfect," she whispered, voice tremulous. Alejandro leaned against the frame, rain still dripping from his coat. "I wanted you to feel safe," he replied, stepping forward. His eyes lingered on her belly, as if each breath she drew was a secret he had missed for too long. Valeria forced a smile and placed a hand on the small table. "Thank you for this." Her words faltered as a wave of dizziness washed over her. The floor tilted beneath her feet. She reached out to steady herself against the table's edge, but her fingers slipped. "Alejandro." Her voice was a ragged breath. The room began to spin, the lilies blurring into white ghosts. He closed the distance in 2 strides, catching her arm. "Valeria!" he cried, his voice thick with alarm. He guided her toward the armchair, but her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor. He scooped her up as gently as one would cradle a child, his arms trembling. "I've got you," he murmured, voice cracking. Her cheek rested against his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat. Fast, erratic, like a trapped bird. Moments later, he had her in the chair, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He knelt before her, hands hovering as if afraid to touch too much. "What's happening?" he asked, panic sharpening each word. She closed her eyes, heavy-lidded. I think I overdid it," she managed, her fingers brushing his jacket. "Moving today, emotions." A low groan escaped her lips, and she sank further into the cushions. "No," he whispered fiercely. He reached for his phone and dialed the clinic. "Dr. Morales? It's Alejandro Kong. I need help. My fiancé has fainted." Valeria's eyes fluttered open. "Fiancé?" The word tumbled out with disbelief and something warmer. "Hope?" He paused, guilt and tenderness warring on his face. I I'm sorry, he said quietly. Valeria, will you marry me? Her eyes widened as if he'd held a star in his palm. She tried to speak but only managed a breathless laugh before her eyelids drooped again. A moment later, the tone on the phone shifted to speaker. Mr. Kong, get her sitting up and keep her warm. I'll send a nurse immediately. He wrapped an arm around her back, helping her upright. You're going to be okay, he said, voice rough. I won't let anything happen to you or our baby. Tears welled in Valeria's eyes. I'm so scared, she whispered against his chest. What if I can't carry her to term? He pressed his forehead to hers, rain still dripping from his coat. You will, he vowed, fingers stroking her hair. We'll face every challenge together. Her breath shuddered through her chest. The world outside the window was a blur of headlights and rain, but inside the small room, time slowed. Every heartbeat echoed, every breath held weight. She fought the edges of consciousness. Promise me, she murmured. Promise you won't leave again. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her trembling lips. I promise, he said, voice absolute. No matter what happens, I'm here. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. She closed her eyes, leaning into his warmth. As the nurse's knock sounded at the door, Alejandro rose to open it, still supporting Valeria's weight. The light in the hallway spilled in, crisp and urgent. The nurse knelt beside Valeria, checking her pulse and temperature. Alejandro hovered, every muscle taut with worry. The nurse's practiced touch reassured him slightly, but he refused to let go of Valeria's hand. She's hypotensive and dehydrated, the nurse said softly. We'll stay and monitor her. I'll draw some blood work and ensure she's stable. Relief flooded him, but it was tainted with regret. He squeezed Valeria's hand. I should have been there, he whispered, voice thick. I should have known you needed rest. She opened her eyes, shadows under them, but a small, fierce light shining within. You're here now, she said. That's what matters. He drew a shaky breath and settled on the floor beside her chair. No more walls, he vowed, echoing the promise he'd just made. I will not let pride or fear dictate my choices again. Valeria managed a faint smile, exhaustion and relief mingling on her lips. Together, she affirmed. She gave him a small smile, though her eyes were shadowed with worry. I've seen the news, she said quietly, her voice barely more than a breath. His chest tightened. It's everywhere, he admitted, glancing at the smartphone on the nightstand. The screen glowed with notifications. Headlines, tweets, news apps. He tapped the screen and the video autoplayed. A flock of reporters crowded outside the hospital doors. Tycoon rushes to save ex-wife. Is this a publicity stunt? Their microphones bobbed like fishing rods, lines cast for any scrap of drama. Valeria watched his face, anguish pooling in her eyes. I can handle the doctors, she whispered. But this feels like a second collapse. He swallowed hard and lifted the phone so she could see. A tabloid reporter's video played. And here he comes again, folks. Will he leave her again once the cameras are gone? The reporter's sneer cut through the room like a knife. Alejandro clenched his jaw. They're twisting everything, he said, frustration flaring. I never wanted this. She reached up, smoothing his suit jacket. They always want a story, but this is our life, she said, voice firm despite the tremor beneath. We can't let them write it for us. He nodded, though his eyes remained troubled. He tapped his phone again and called his assistant. Bring in security, he said. I need the entrance cleared. He paused. And tell the press to back off. No statements. As he ended the call, the door clicked open and a nurse entered, clipboard in hand. How are we feeling this morning? She asked cheerfully, unaware of the tension. Valeria managed a small laugh. Better now that the sun's up. The nurse glanced at the monitor. Baby's heart rate is strong. Keep resting. I'll send your breakfast soon. She offered a polite smile at Alejandro, then slipped out. As the door closed, Valeria exhaled. I'm thankful for you, she murmured. But I don't want to owe my peace of mind to bodyguards and headlines. He sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. I know, he said, which is why I'm going to face them. Alone. Her brows rose. Alone. He squeezed her hand. They came for you. Now they'll get me. I'll tell them the truth. That I'm here because I love you, not for a photo op. Her heart fluttered at the sincerity in his voice, and then puckered with fear. What if it backfires? He leaned closer, voice low and steady. Then at least they'll know this is real. She searched his face, seeing the steel in his gaze, the vulnerability behind it. The overhead speaker crackled with an announcement. Security, please clear the west entrance. Unauthorized personnel must remain at least 50 meters away. He glanced toward the door. It's happening now. Valeria's pulse hammered. Promise me you'll be careful. He pressed his lips to her palm. Always. Moments later, the door opened quietly and his head of security slipped in. He bowed his head in deference to Valeria, then looked to Alejandro. The press is holding back. They're waiting for you outside. Alejandro stood and turned to Valeria. I'll be right back, he promised. I won't be long. She nodded, watching as he strode out into the corridor. Her pulse roared in her ears as footsteps faded. Alone, she stared at the monitor, willing herself to focus on the steady heartbeat that answered her prayers. In the hallway, lights buzzed overhead and the antiseptic air smelled of hope and fear. At the end, reporters clustered behind a thin line of security. As Alejandro approached, cameras swiveled toward him like vultures. He raised a hand, waiting until the noise ebbed. Then, with his back straight and shoulders squared, he spoke. Valeria is doing fine, he announced, voice steady but rich with emotion. She's resting, and so is our baby. I ask for privacy so she can recover in peace. Shouts rose. Can we get a comment on your relationship? Is this your attempt at redemption? He lifted his chin. No redemption needed, only compassion. His gaze flicked to the cameras. I'm not here for publicity. I'm here because I love her. Silence fell, a rare and fragile hush, as his words cut through the clamor. A solitary flashbulb popped, then another. Back in her room, Valeria heard the distant echoes of his voice. She slid from the bed to the chair by the window and peered through the blinds. There he stood, framed by the bright hospital doors, standing tall amid the storm of lenses. Tears pricked her eyes, tears of relief, of pride, and of a growing hope that this time, they could define their own story. Valeria watched the dust motes drift in the light. Her heart still fluttered from his bold stand at the hospital entrance, but a shadow clung to her confidence. She turned her hand, pulling it away gently. Alejandro, she began, voice small. He dropped his gaze to her face, alert. I know you've done everything you can, she said, but I can't forget the man who left me in that penthouse, who valued his image over our life. Her eyes glistened as she spoke, but she wouldn't let the tears fall. How am I supposed to trust that you won't vanish again once the stress returns? He swallowed hard. Valeria, please believe me. His voice cracked. He lifted her hand, pressing it to his lips. If I could undo the past, I would. I was terrified of the bored, of losing control. I thought I was protecting you. I see now that my fear hurt you more. She closed her eyes, leaning away. I don't want excuses, she whispered. I want action. I need to know you're here for the long haul. Silence stretched between them like a tight wire. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the curtains, and the distant honk of traffic reminded them that life continued, indifferent. He rose slowly and went to the small mahogany desk by the window. From beneath a stack of papers, he withdrew a slim leather-bound notebook. He returned to the sofa and handed it to her. This is every appointment I've scheduled for you and the baby, checkups, nutrition classes, even prenatal yoga if you like. And here, he flipped to another section, are the names and contacts of people I've hired to help around the house. You choose whoever you want. No one else can call them except you. Valeria's brow furrowed. You did all this today? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, eyes earnest. From the moment I left the hospital, I worked to make things right. I did it not because I have to, but because I want to, because you and our child deserve every bit of care and respect. She opened the notebook hesitantly, running her fingers over the crisp pages. Each entry was precise. Dates, times, addresses. Her heart thudded. You really thought of everything, she said, breath catching. Even when I said I didn't want charity. He leaned forward. This isn't charity. This partnership. I want to share the load and the joy. A single tear escaped her lashes. She looked down at her belly and then back to his face. I'm scared, she admitted, voice trembling. Scared that if I lean on you, I'll lose what little independence I have left. Scared that I'll expect too much. He reached across, brushing the tear away with his thumb. Lean on me, he whispered. If you fall, I'll catch you. And if I fail, I'll keep trying until I get it right. Her breath hitched as the weight of his promise settled over her. She closed the notebook and placed it in her lap. All right, she said softly. But no more walls between us, ever. He smiled, relief flooding his features. No more walls, he vowed. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension easing like a tide receding from the shore. Then Valeria's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen. A message from Mina confirming tomorrow's doctor's appointment. She paused, then typed back, "Thank you." Alejandro watched her, a hopeful question in his eyes. "Do you believe me now?" he asked, voice gentle. Valeria folded her hands, feeling the gentle rise of life under her palm. "I want to," she said, looking into his eyes. "I really do." A faint smile curved his lips. "That's enough for me," he said. He rose and offered his hand. "Come on, let's go for a walk. Fresh air might do us good." She hesitated, doubt flickering in her gaze, but then she placed her hand in his. Together, they stepped into the bright afternoon light, the door closing softly behind them. As they walked down the hallway, she felt the tension inside her chest loosen, just a little. Alejandro glanced at her, concern softening his gaze. "You've been silent," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" Valeria paused, her fingers curling around the strap of her purse. The notebook he'd given her lay heavy in her coat pocket, filled with appointments and helpers, a testament to his commitment, but also a reminder of how far she'd fallen. She swallowed. "There's something I haven't told you yet." He stopped and turned toward her, the blossoms framing his profile like a halo. "Anything," he promised. She looked down at the pavement, tracing cracks with her eyes. "After we split, I lost almost everything." Her voice wavered as she spoke the words out loud for the first time. "My savings vanished in legal fees. My apartment lease expired, and I had to move twice. I burned through what little I had before I found the cafe. I've been living on a small state stipend, barely enough for rent and food." He inhaled sharply, as if the air itself carried her desperation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears glimmered at the corners of her eyes. "I was ashamed." She met his gaze, brave despite the quiver in her voice. "I thought if you saw how low I'd sunk, you wouldn't want to be part of it." He reached out, lifting her chin so their eyes met. "Valeria, you don't have to hide from me." His thumb brushed away a stray tear. "I love you. I love you and our child. I want to carry your burdens with you." His voice quivered with emotion. She closed her eyes, the cherry petals swirling around them like a snow globe whirled. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of depending on you, of losing my dignity all over again." He opened his arms. Without hesitation, she stepped into his embrace, pressing her cheek to his chest. His heart thundered beneath her ear. "Lean on me," he whispered. "I'll never let go." They continued walking, and Alejandro asked, "Where do you live now?" She unzipped her coat and pulled out a tattered envelope, the edges worn from being tucked into her pocket. "Here," she said, handing it to him. Inside was a lease agreement. A small, cramped studio apartment on the city's edge, handwritten receipts for monthly rent, and a list of basic groceries. He scanned the papers, heart sinking. This place... He looked up, anguish flickering across his face. Valeria, you shouldn't have had to live like this. Her shoulders tightened. It was temporary, just until I could save a bit. Then the cafe collapse happened. And, well, she gestured to the apartment address scrawled at the top. I couldn't afford to move again. He folded the lease back into the envelope and held it like a sacred trust. We'll find you something better, he said, voice firm. A home that's truly yours. No more studios at the edge of nowhere. Her pulse fluttered with a fragile hope. And if I refuse your help? He paused, gentle but unwavering. Then I'll stand by you until you change your mind. They walked on in silence for a moment, the blossoms drifting down around them as if blessing this confession. Then he asked quietly, Did you ever consider asking me directly for help? Her gaze flicked upward, eyes bright with unshed tears. I wanted to, but every time I tried, my pride choked me. I thought it was better to survive alone than to burden you. He stopped again, took both her hands in his and lifted them to his lips. You're never a burden, he said. Not now, not ever. Let me be your strength. Valeria's chest tightened. The notebook in her pocket felt like both lifeline and millstone. She closed her eyes against the swirl of emotion and nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll let you help me. A solitary tear slipped down her cheek. He brushed it away with unimaginable tenderness, then drew her into his arms. Under the canopy of pink blossoms, she rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. They continued their walk, and Alejandro steered them toward a small park bench beneath an ancient oak. He unfolded the lease envelope and set it beside him. This afternoon, he said, we'll drive to see a place I've arranged for you. It's close to the clinic, but also safe, with a garden where the baby can feel the sun. Valeria looked up, awe and caution mingling in her gaze. You did all this? He smiled, eyes shining. I wanted you to know I'm serious, that I honor every part of your life, even the parts you thought were too broken for me to touch. She reached out to stroke his cheek. You're changing everything, she said, voice soft with wonder. I never knew love could feel like this. He tucked a stray hair behind her ear. It's because this time it's real. No walls, no facades, just us and our child. Her heart swelled. In that moment, she believed it. The weight of her past burdens lightened. The future remained uncertain. The challenges of pregnancy, the whispers of the press, the fear of relapse into old habits. But here, in Alejandro's arms under the cherry blossoms, she felt the stirrings of a new beginning. The road ahead would be long, but she no longer had to walk it alone. Ready? He asked quietly. She nodded, swallowing hard. Let's do this. A courteous administrator led them to a private office. Inside, stacks of folders and a polished mahogany table spoke of efficiency and authority. Alejandro held the door open for Valeria, gently guiding her to the seat beside him. Good morning, Mr. Kong. Ms. Suarez? The administrator began, voice clipped but polite. We understand you wish to arrange comprehensive coverage for Ms. Suarez's prenatal care and any necessary hospitalization. Alejandro met her gaze, steady and sincere. Yes, I'd like to set up full financial responsibility, consultations, tests, inpatient care, everything. No detail left out. The administrator nodded, flipping open a binder. Very well. We will begin with authorizing the necessary consents and prepayments. Ms. Suarez, I'll need your signature here for privacy and here for treatment authorization. Valeria's pen hovered over the forms. Her heart pounded, every stroke of ink marking a step away from her independence. She caught Alejandro's eye. It's okay, he whispered, lifting her hand. We're in this together. She exhaled and signed. Then he signed on the dotted lines for the financial guarantee. As he wrote, she watched the fine script of his signature, Alejandro Kong, and felt something shift inside her. The administrator collected the papers. All set. We've scheduled your next 3 ultrasounds and arranged a private room for when the time comes. You'll receive reminders via text. Valeria closed her eyes, relief washing over her like warm sunlight. Thank you, she said, voice trembling. Alejandro stood, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Come on, he said softly. I want to show you something. He led her back into the atrium, where he had parked a sleek black sedan. Instead of driving, however, he guided her to a small cafe kiosk inside the hospital. He ordered 2 herbal teas and a pastry. They sat at a tiny table, steam curling between them. Valeria cradled the warm mug in both hands. You didn't have to do all that paperwork yourself, she said, voice thick with emotion. I could have handled it. He reached across, covering her hand with his. I wanted to, he said quietly. I wanted to show you I'm not just here for grand gestures. I'm here for the daily things, too. She looked at him, eyes bright. Daily things? Like tea in a hospital cafe? He smiled, a slow curve of his lips. Exactly, because if you can find a moment of comfort here, I want to be the one who provides it. Tears welled in her eyes. The walls she had built around her heart trembled under the weight of his intention. She set down her mug and placed both hands on his. I thank you, she managed, for believing in us. He leaned forward, brushing a kiss to her knuckles. I always will, he vowed. A soft chime sounded from her phone. She glanced down. A confirmation text for her next appointment, all expenses covered. She closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. All right, she whispered. Let's take it one day at a time. He nodded, his expression tender and resolute. One day at a time. Finally, she leaned forward, voice soft but firm. Alejandro, there's something I need to say. He glanced at her, tension tightening his jaw. I've been thinking about when you left me, really left, with no warning, no explanation. I stood in that penthouse, heart pounding, desperate for you to come back. But you didn't. Her words trembled on the edge of tears. You let me face that alone. He slowed the car, pulling to the curb beneath a flickering lamppost. He turned so the glow fell across his face. Valeria, his voice caught. He wanted to blame the board, the pressure, the fear, but each excuse felt like more distance between them. He swallowed. I was selfish. Her eyes glistened. Selfish? She echoed, hurt sharpening her tone. I was carrying our child, Alejandro. Every day, I woke up wondering if I'd survive the next dawn, and you walked away. He closed his eyes, guilt crashing down. I thought I was protecting you from my world, this endless storm of demand and expectation. I convinced myself that absence was safety, but I was wrong. I see that now. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. You think I didn't feel trapped? Afraid? Alone? Every night I cried for help I didn't know how to ask for. Her voice cracked, grief and anger weaving together. And you weren't there. He reached across, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I can't undo what happened, but I promise you this. I will be here from now on. No more disappearing when things get hard. Her gaze locked on his, searching. Words are easy, she said quietly. Actions, that's what matters. He nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Actions, he repeated. He placed his hand over hers. I'll prove it every day. I'll be present for every appointment, every late-night craving, every fear you whisper in the dark. I'll hold your hand if you faint again, and I'll carry you to safety if you ever need me. She blinked, tears spilling free. Promise me you'll never give up, no matter how hard it gets. He leaned in, forehead to forehead, breath mingling. I promise, he vowed. Even when I'm scared, even when I doubt myself, I will choose you and our child above all else. Her shoulders slackened, the first tremor of relief softening her posture. I want to believe you, she whispered, but I need time. I need to see that promise in every moment. He nodded, respect and determination shining in his eyes. Take all the time you need. I'll wait, and I won't let a single moment slip by without showing you how much you mean to me. She exhaled, leaning back into her seat. Outside, the city lights blurred past, but inside that small car, something fragile shifted, hope glimmering in the darkness. As they continued down the quiet street, Valeria pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the faint flutter of life within. She thought of the struggle behind them and the challenges ahead. The prying eyes of the press, the demands of his world, the vulnerability of carrying a child alone for so long. But in that moment, with Alejandro's promise echoing in her heart, she dared to imagine a future where they faced every trial together. He reached over and intertwined his fingers with hers, squeezing gently. "Whatever comes," he said, voice low, "we face it together." "You're awake early," he said, setting 2 plates on the table. The eggs were perfectly golden, the side of fruit artfully arranged. Valeria pressed her lips together, eyes on the pattern of the tablecloth. "I couldn't sleep," she murmured. Each night her mind raced. Would this peace last? Could she truly depend on him? He sat across from her, concern knitting his brow. Bad dreams again? She swallowed, the bitter memory of past abandonment rising like acid in her throat. "Nightmares," she admitted, "of being alone." Her voice cracked, "and of waking up next to someone who might disappear." His expression tightened with remorse. He reached for her hand, but she slipped hers away, hugging the teacup to her chest as though it were a shield. "I thought I could forget what happened," she continued, voice low. "But every time I see you doing something kind, I wonder if you're setting me up to owe you to feel beholden." Alejandro's fork hovered in midair. "Valeria, I don't want to owe you anything. I want us to be equals." She met his gaze, eyes shining with unshed tears. "How can we be equals when you write the checks, make all the decisions? You choose the helpers, the apartment, the doctors. Where do I fit into this?" His jaw clenched. "I only made those choices because you said you needed support. I asked you what you wanted." "No," she interrupted, voice rising despite her exhaustion. "You decided for me." She slammed her teacup on the table. The clatter echoed like a warning. "Every plan, every gesture. It feels like you're rewriting my life. But my life existed before you." He stood, chair scraping the floor. "Valeria, please. I'm trying." She rose as well, backing away until her shoulder brushed the counter. Trying isn't enough. Her hands trembled in fists at her sides. "I need to know you trust me to make my own choices, even if they scare me." He stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. "I do trust you. I trust you with my heart. If you want to choose the helpers, pick the dates, decide when to see the doctor, then I'll follow your lead." Her breath hitched, the anger in her chest warred with a deeper fear that if she let him surrender control, she would finally have to allow herself to lean on him. He reached out, fingertips hovering near her arm. "Tell me what you need right now." Valeria's eyes darted away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I need space," she whispered. "I need to wake up tomorrow and find my own breakfast on the table. I need to make a plan. And I need you to wait. Not doing nothing, but letting me take the first step." He nodded slowly, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "I can do that." His voice was raw. "I want to do that." She wiped her eyes, breathing unevenly. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking. "I'm not rejecting you. I'm just struggling to accept this new life, the dependence it brings." He closed the distance and wrapped her in a careful hug, neither too tight nor too distant. "I understand," he murmured. "I'll be here waiting for your lead, and when you're ready, we'll move forward together." She leaned into him, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly but not disappearing. "Together," she repeated, but the single word tasted uncertain on her lips, like the beginning of a question. He pulled back and offered her a small smile, the sadness in his eyes shining like glass. "Together," he echoed, though neither knew what tomorrow would bring. She slipped from the bed, wrapping Alejandro's sweater around her shoulders, and crept to the living room. Through the curtain's edge, she saw a cluster of lenses and microphones pressed against the hallway door, security guards wrestling to keep them at bay. Her heart thudded. "Oh no," she whispered. Behind her, Alejandro appeared in the doorway, face grim. "They found you," he said quietly, wrapping an arm around her. "I asked them to stay away." Valeria shook her head, panic rising. "They never stop." She swallowed hard. "I'm not ready for this." A reporter's voice pierced the air. Urgent. "Ms. Suarez, how are you feeling today? Is Mr. Kong really going to stay by your side?" Another shouted. "Can you confirm if you two are?" The barrage of questions rattled Valeria's composure. She backed toward Alejandro, eyes wide. I can't face them." He guided her gently to the sofa and knelt before her, voice low but fierce. "You don't have to answer anything. I'll handle this." His hand clasped hers, warmth bleeding reassurance into her veins. From the hallway, the reporters pressed forward, attempting to dangle microphones under the guards' arms. "Stay back," Alejandro's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. He rose, pulling Valeria behind him. "You will not harass her." A young reporter tried to press through. "Mr. Kong, is this a publicity stunt to save your image?" He stepped forward, jaw set. "You will not speak for us. Valeria's health is private." His eyes locked on the camera lenses. "Leave her alone." The guards formed a tighter circle, gently ushering the reporters away. Shouts faded into the distance. In the hush that followed, Valeria's breath came in tremulous gasps. Alejandro returned to her side, kneeling once more. "I'm sorry," he said, voice soft. "I thought I could control it." She closed her eyes, leaning into his chest. "They're relentless. I feel like I can't breathe." He stroked her hair, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We'll find a better way to protect you. A new address, no press passes, no leaks. I'll fix this." Her fingers clenched his jacket. "What if they follow us everywhere?" He paused, considering. Then he reached into his pocket and produced a small card. "I've arranged for a private nurse to stay with you for a few days, and I'm moving our appointments to a clinic that guarantees confidentiality." She opened her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You keep saving me," she whispered. He shook his head. "You don't need saving, Valeria. You need peace. And I want to give that to you without fanfare, without noise." Her voice trembled with emotion. "Promise me you'll never let them trap me like this again." He took her hands in both of his. "I promise. From now on, I'll build walls around you instead of around myself. I'll be your shield, always." For a moment, they sat in the quiet apartment, the rain's rhythm the only witness. Then Valeria turned in his arms, pressing her lips to his cheek. "Thank you," she murmured, "for being here." He smiled, but his eyes held a question, an awareness of battles still to come. "Always," he vowed. "No storm can touch us when we face it together." She sat up too quickly. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Panic thoughts surged. Had something gone wrong overnight? She pressed a hand to her belly, as if to ward off danger. Outside her door, Alejandro waited, coffee in hand. He looked up, relief shining in his eyes when he saw her awake, but it shifted instantly to concern as he noticed the strain in her face. "What is it?" he asked, stepping forward. Valeria swallowed, voice trembling. "The doctor wants me in today. Urgent." His coffee cup clattered onto the table as he crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling beside her. "We'll go now," he said, voice low but urgent. He helped her to her feet, wrapping an arm around her waist. At the clinic, the sterile corridors felt endless. Nurses in pastel scrubs guided them down to the ultrasound suite. Valeria's breath caught with each step. The hum of fluorescent lights felt like a countdown. Alejandro's hand never left her back, a steady anchor in the storm. They slipped into the exam room. Dr. Morales waited, expression grave. "Valeria, good morning," she said gently, ushering her to the table. The ultrasound gel was cold against Valeria's skin, and she flinched. Alejandro stood behind her, fingers laced with hers on the table's edge. Dr. Morales moved the probe across her belly, eyes scanning the monitor. The silence stretched unbearably. Finally, the doctor exhaled. "I'm concerned," she said. "Your cervix is shortening. At this rate, there's a significant risk of preterm labor, possibly within weeks." Valeria's heart stopped. She tried to inhale but only managed a choked gasp. "Preterm?" Dr. Morales nodded, voice compassionate but firm. "We need to admit you for bed rest and monitoring. I'm recommending a circlage placement to reinforce the cervix, plus corticosteroids to develop the baby's lungs faster." Alejandro's grip tightened, knuckles white against her fingers. He looked from Valeria to the doctor and back again, as if the words might shift into something softer. "Is it urgent?" "It's best we do it today," Dr. Morales replied. "Delaying increases the risk of irreversible change." Valeria closed her eyes, tears welling. The weight of terror pressed into her chest. She remembered his promise. "I'll catch you if you fall." Now she was falling into a silence of fear. Alejandro dropped to one knee, meeting her gaze. "Val, I'm right here," he whispered, voice thick. "We'll do this together. I'm not going anywhere." She inhaled, clinging to the steady warmth of his words. "I'm scared," she admitted. What if this is too soon? What if the baby can't?" Her voice cracked. He placed a finger under her chin, lifting her face. "Hey," he said softly, "you're stronger than you realize, and our baby is fighting inside you. The doctors have a plan, and I'll be by your side through every second." She nodded, wiping a tear. "Okay," she whispered. Moments later, they followed Dr. Morales down to the surgical suite. Valeria's legs trembled with each step, adrenaline and dread weaving through her veins. Alejandro caught her arm, steadying her. "Lean on me," he reminded her. In the pre-op room, nurses swirled around, prepping monitors and 4 lines. Alejandro held Valeria's hand as the anesthesiologist explained the procedure, his voice a distant drone. The surgery bed felt impossibly cold when she lay down. Alejandro lowered himself onto the stool beside her, wrapping a blanket around both of them. "I wish I could take your place," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She managed a tired smile. "Then I'd hold you," she said, "because you deserve someone to catch you too." He pressed his lips to her hand. "I love you," he whispered, voice breaking. "We'll get through this." The nurse applied the mask, and Valeria's vision blurred. Alejandro leaned in, kissing her cheek. "See you on the other side," he promised. When the world went dark, his voice was the last thing she heard. "You're not alone, Val. I'm here. Always." Hours later, Alejandro paced the waiting room's corridor, hands clenched at his sides. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, Dr. Morales emerged, her expression softer. "He's in recovery," she announced. The circlage was successful. Valeria responded well to the anesthesia, and the baby's heartbeat is strong. We'll monitor her overnight, but at this moment, both are stable. Alejandro exhaled a tremulous breath, pressing a hand to his chest. "Thank you," he said, voice hushed. Dr. Morales gave him a small smile. "She's lucky to have you." He walked to the recovery room and slipped inside. Valeria lay asleep, blankets tucked around her, a faint line of relief in her features. On the monitor, the steady beat of the fetal heartbeat pulsed like hope. He sat beside her, cradling her hand. No words were needed. The gentle rise and fall of her chest spoke of courage. Alejandro pressed his forehead to her hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. In the quiet, he whispered, "We made it through the storm, and I'll ride every thunderhead if it means keeping you both safe." He lifted his phone and glanced at the text from Valeria, sent just moments before. "I'm asleep now. Thank you for everything. Please be careful." His chest tightened. He closed his eyes, centering himself on the reason he'd returned to this crucible of scrutiny. When he opened them, his expression was calm, resolute. "Good evening," he began, voice low but carrying. The murmur of the crowd stilled. "I know many of you have questions about my relationship with Valeria Suarez, about my motives, And yes, about the health of our unborn child. A flash of cameras lit his face. He paused, drawing strength from the memory of Valeria's fragile smile last night in recovery. I'm not here to manipulate the story. I'm here because I care. Deeply. A reporter shouted. Is this a stunt to save your public image? He held up a hand. No stunt. No spin. Last night, my fiancé underwent a procedure that could not wait, and I realized something fundamental. Success in business means nothing if I cannot protect the people I love. He spoke each word as though pressing it into stone. So tonight, I'm making a decision that I hope will surprise no one. And yet, for me, it is the hardest choice I've ever made. The crowd leaned in. Alejandro's heart pounded. This was the moment his world would shift. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Kong Industries. I will assume the role of executive chairman, delegating the day-to-day operations to my trusted team. I need to be present for Valeria, for our baby, and for the life we are building together. I will no longer let my work overshadow my family. Gasps rippled through the press. Someone cried out, "Are you serious?" He nodded firmly. Serious. I refuse to choose between my company and my responsibilities as a partner and father. My priorities are clear now. Her well-being, our child's health, and the trust one broke long ago. He stepped forward, gaze unwavering. I ask for your understanding, and for respect for our privacy as we navigate this new chapter. A camera bulb flashed. Alejandro paused, letting the finality of his words settle over the crowd. The reporters exchanged astonished looks. Then, one by one, questions erupted about board reactions, stock prices, legal implications, but his resolve held. After 10 minutes, he thanked them and turned away. Back in the hallway, security parted like the Red Sea. He removed his tie, loosening the knot as though shedding the last vestige of his former life. His phone buzzed again. "Mina, I'll bring Valeria home tomorrow. She's been asking for you." His throat constricted. Home. A word he hadn't meant in years. He stepped into the private elevator and rode down in silence, each ding a heartbeat marking the distance between the public spectacle and the woman he loved. On the ground floor, the private doors slid open to reveal a quiet corridor, one flickering lamp leading to Valeria's room. He paused outside her door, hand trembling on the handle. Inside, the nurse glanced up from her chart. "He's awake," she said softly. "She's been asking for you." He nodded and entered. Valeria lay propped on pillows, the morning sun painting her hair gold. Her eyes widened when she saw him, a hesitant smile blooming on her lips, tentative, fragile, yet full of welcome. He crossed the room and knelt by her bed. "I did it," he whispered, voice thick. "I stepped down." She blinked, as if the words rearranged her world. "You did?" she asked, breath catching. He reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. "For us." His thumb brushed against her wedding band. "I'm here now, every morning, every night. No more absences." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I never thought I'd hear you say that." He tucked her hair behind her ear, tender and deliberate. "I meant every word. There will be hard days, financial shifts, questions from family and the board. But I'll face them all. With you." She closed her eyes, exhaustion and emotion mingling. "I need you," she whispered, "more than I ever knew." He brushed a kiss to her forehead. "And you have me." His voice trembled with relief and promise. "Always." For a moment, they sat in the hush of the hospital room, the world outside still turning. But within these four walls, a new equilibrium had been forged. A family reborn from fear, sacrifice, and love. As Valeria rested, Alejandro stood at the window, looking out at the rising sun. Ahead lay uncertainty, board meetings, press fallout, the uncharted territory of fatherhood. But for the first time, he felt the weight on his shoulders had purpose. He had made the great decision. And as long as Valeria's hand stayed in his, as long as their baby's heartbeat thrummed in the next room, he would never look back. "Valeria," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. She turned her head, eyes glassy but alert. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, fingertips lingering at her temple. I want to say something I should have said a long time ago. She managed a faint smile, pain flickering at the edges. You've said so much already, she said, throat thick. But he shook his head, eyes earnest. No, not enough. He swallowed, searching for words strong enough to carry the weight in his chest. I'm sorry, truly sorry, for every time I let you face the storm alone, for every tear you shed in silence, for every moment you wondered if I cared more about my empire than about you. Her gaze softened, a single tear escaping to trace down her cheek. It hurt, she whispered. When you disappeared, I felt abandoned, like the ground had opened beneath me and I was free falling. He closed his eyes, grief twisting his features. I was terrified that if I stayed, I'd ruin everything. Your peace, our child's safety, our future. His voice cracked. But I see now that running away only caused more damage. You needed me, needed my support, my love. And I failed you. Valeria's hand tightened around his. I needed someone to hold me when I collapsed in that cafe, she said, tears pooling in her eyes. And when I woke alone, I didn't know if I could keep going. Every night, I fought to breathe through panic. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. I'm here now, he vowed, breath mingling with hers. I won't let fear dictate my choices again. I promise you. I'll stand by you through every contraction of doubt, every wave of uncertainty. I'll be your anchor. Her tears fell freely now, grief and relief mingling as she whispered. I've blamed myself too, for trusting you again, for letting hope take root. She looked away, shame coloring her tone. I'm scared that if I let go entirely, I'll break if you leave me again. He cupped her cheek, tilting her face back to his. Then let me be the one who catches you, he said softly. Let me prove that love isn't just a word I spoke on stages or in boardrooms. Let me live it, day by day. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. Valeria, will you let me love you fully, even when it's messy and hard? Her breath caught as she searched his eyes, gray flecks rimmed with concern, unwavering in their warmth. She felt the stir of hope, fluttering like a fragile bird. Yes, she whispered. I want to believe you, but I need time to trust my own heart again. He nodded, sincerity glowing in his gaze. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, ready whenever you're willing to let me in deeper. He slid off the stool and knelt beside her, lifting her hand to his lips once more. You are the reason I changed my life. You and our baby deserve a father and partner who never walks away. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle echo of the fetal monitor. Valeria felt the tiny flutter of their child inside her, a steady reminder of what they had at stake. She placed her free hand on her belly, then touched Alejandro's cheek with her other. I'm tired of fighting alone, she admitted, voice trembling. I want to fight beside you, not against you. She closed her eyes, leaning into his warmth. But I need to know that when the next crisis comes, when the press, the board, or my own fears surge, you'll hold me instead of letting go. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her into a gentle embrace. I will, he vowed. I'll hold you through every high and every low. You'll never face a crisis alone again. She buried her face in his chest, tears soaking into his shirt. For the first time in months, she felt the fierce certainty of his promise unwinding the tension in her body. They stayed like that for a long moment, two flawed souls clinging to each other in a hospital room where futures could shatter or be rebuilt. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were clearer, steadier. Let's face whatever comes next, she said, voice small but resolute. Together. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, drawing strength from her words. Together, he echoed, as if carving the promise in stone. And when the storm comes, and it will, I'll be the shelter you can always return to. Good morning, he began, voice steady. Even the acoustics seemed to soften his words. I've called this emergency meeting to finalize the transition. As of yesterday, I'm stepping back from the CEO role, and I intend to abide by that decision. A senior board member, Elena Park, folded her arms. Mr. Kong, she said coolly, our stakeholders need reassurance. Quarterly projections are at risk. How do you intend to balance our fiduciary duty with your personal commitments? Alejandro met her gaze without flinching. By redefining what fiduciary duty means, we're implementing a new policy that ties executive bonuses to employee well-being metrics, not just margins. If our people thrive, our products improve, and yes, our bottom line will follow. A murmur rippled through the room. The CFO, Raj Patel, cleared his throat. That's unconventional and untested. Investors don't buy warm and fuzzy narratives. They buy returns. He nodded. I understand the risk, but this company was founded on innovation, on challenging the status quo. If we can't take calculated moral risks, then what differentiates us from any other profit machine? Silence settled, heavy and electric. Elena's eyes drifted to the projection screen behind Alejandro, where a slide displayed People First Initiative in bold letters. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. I'll need detailed metrics, she said finally, voice softening but still firm. Employee retention rates, workplace satisfaction surveys, health program outcomes, you name it. Show us the data, and we'll back you. Alejandro allowed himself a small smile of relief. Consider it done. I've already engaged our analytics team to integrate these KPIs into every quarterly report. He paused, letting the weight of his promise hang in the air. Starting next quarter, we'll present side-by-side charts. Revenue growth and well-being metrics, hand in hand. Raj shifted in his seat. And what about your own role? Who's running day-to-day operations? Maria Santos, Alejandro replied. She'll be acting CEO. She's been with us for 8 years, led our international expansion, and she shares our commitment to ethical leadership. He tapped the corner of his desk. I'll serve as executive chairman, available for strategic decisions, mentorship, and crisis management. But she'll have autonomy. Heads nodded around the table. Some faces remained guarded. Change of this magnitude always carries uncertainty. But Alejandro pressed on, presenting delegation charts, revised reporting lines, and a communication plan that would roll out to every department by week's end. When the meeting finally adjourned, applause was sparse but sincere. As board members trickled out, Elena lingered by the door. She looked at him with unexpected warmth. You're asking us to leap into the unknown, she said quietly. But I admire your conviction. Let's make this work. He exhaled, tension slipping from his shoulders. Thank you, Elena. I won't let you down. Alone now, he gathered the folders he'd prepared and made his way down the corridor. The weight of expectation pressed against him. Public scrutiny, investor doubt, the fragile health of Valeria and their child all competing in his mind. Yet beneath it hovered something steadier. Purpose. Outside his former office, he paused at the window. Below, the city pulsed with life. Cars weaving, office lights flickering on, people rushing toward their own battles. Alejandro lifted his phone and opened a message from Valeria. Proud of you. I love you. His fingertips trembled as he typed back. Coming home soon. Love you both. Almost there, he whispered, brushing damp hair from her temple. You're doing amazing. She bit her lip against the next wave, nodding through gritted teeth. Promise me you'll stay, she panted. He planted a soft kiss on her forehead. I promise, he said, voice thick. I'm not going anywhere. The room beyond the sliding doors was a blur of pale green scrubs and beeping machines. A nurse ushered them to the bed. We're ready for you, Miss Suarez. How are you feeling? Valeria forced a tired smile. Scared, she admitted, voice trembling. But ready. Alejandro perched on a stool beside her, gripping her hand as the midwife checked her progress. You're fully dilated, the midwife said. Time to push when you're ready. A breath later, Valeria cried out and bore down with everything she had. Alejandro's stomach twisted at the primal sound of her pain and determination. He lifted her hand to his lips. Push, the midwife coached. 1, 2, 3. With each count, Valeria's strength surprised him, stronger than any steel boardroom he'd ever commanded. Sweat beaded on her brow. She squeezed her eyes shut, gathering every fragment of courage. At 5, a final, shuddering exertion, she collapsed back against the pillow, panting. The midwife announced, "It's a girl!" Tears stung Alejandro's eyes as the tiny cry filled the room. He pressed his palm to his mouth, barely daring to breathe. The nurse placed the pink, wailing bundle on Valeria's chest. "Oh," she whispered, tears spilling free. "She's beautiful." Their daughter blinked up at them, damp and perfect, her fist curled against Valeria's collarbone. Alejandro leaned forward, voice cracking, "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world." Valeria's fingers trembled as she touched the baby's cheek. "We've waited so long to meet you," she cooed, voice thick with wonder. Her tears dripped into the newborn's hair. The midwife and nurse stepped back, giving the family their moment. In the hush that followed the baby's cries, Alejandro reached over and brushed a kiss to Valeria's temple. "You were incredible," he murmured. "So strong." Valeria closed her eyes against the pain and joy swirling inside her. "We did it," she breathed. "Together." He brushed back a strand of her hair and kissed her forehead. "Together," he agreed. "Always." They sat like that for a long, trembling beat. Mother, father, daughter, bound by the surge of emotion only a first embrace can bring. Outside, footsteps approached. The nurse returned with a clean blanket and a tiny cap. Alejandro gently wrapped their daughter in the soft fleece. She yawned, her tiny lungs echoing the presence of life's fragile miracle. Valeria watched him, her eyes luminous. "Name her?" he asked softly, looking from baby to mother. Valeria inhaled, heart full. "Isabella Grace," she said, voice husky. "Isabella, after my grandmother, Grace, for the kindness and strength we found in each other." Alejandro smiled through tears. "Isabella Grace Kong," he repeated, cradling her. He lifted her so she could gaze at both parents. "Welcome to our family." Isabella's cry softened into a contented murmur as Alejandro settled her in Valeria's arms. Valeria traced a fingertip along her daughter's tiny fist. "I love you both so much," she whispered, voice trembling. His hand covered hers. "We love you more than words," he said, kissing the baby's head. In that small hospital room, the world outside seemed to fall away. The months of fear, the press, the pain, the emptiness, were now just shadows behind them. Before them lay the uncharted territory of parenthood, of tiny hands and midnight lullabies. But as long as they held Isabella between them, they knew they would face every challenge together. Hours later, as Isabella slept in a bassinet beside the bed, Alejandro leaned in to brush a kiss on Valeria's lips. She smiled, exhaustion and joy mingling. "Our little family," he whispered. "I can't believe how big she's getting," Valeria said, her voice warm with wonder. She paused, turning to watch Isabella's dark eyelashes fluttering against Alejandro's shirt. 3 weeks already. It feels like both a heartbeat and a lifetime. Alejandro smiled, careful not to jostle their daughter. "Every day teaches me something new," he admitted. "Last night I tried to soothe her with that old lullaby my mother used to sing. It didn't work. I think she prefers silence over my singing, but just being here, by your side, feels enough." Valeria laughed softly, the sound drifting like petals on the breeze. "She likes your heartbeat. Remember how she stilled in the hospital room, listening to you, her eyes filled. She knew your promise before she ever heard your words." He kissed the top of her head, and Valeria closed her eyes at the warmth. "I keep thinking back to that day in the plaza when you first collapsed," he murmured. "I thought I'd failed you then, left you to face the world alone. But standing here now, I see I was just learning how to be the man you needed." They reached a bench overlooking the fountain where Valeria had once hidden tears. Alejandro sat and lifted Isabella so that Valeria could cradle her. The baby stirred, stretching her fingers as if reaching for the rippling water. Valeria brushed a gentle finger across her palm. "Look at those little hands," she whispered, "so full of possibility." Alejandro knelt before them, his hand resting on his wife's knee. "Valeria," he said softly, voice threaded with gratitude. "You taught me that love isn't about perfect plans or grand gestures. It's about showing up, even when you're scared, even when the world is watching. It's about carrying each other through the dark." Valeria placed Isabella against her heart, feeling the pulse of two lives intertwined. "You showed me what it means to trust again," she replied, eyes glistening. "I used to think strength was standing alone, but real strength is in letting someone stand with you." A single cherry blossom petal drifted down, coming to rest on Isabella's swaddling. Alejandro reached out to catch it, marveling at its delicate form. "That's life," he said, voice low. "So fragile, so fleeting, and yet so transformative. We never know which moment will change us forever." Valeria nestled Isabella closer and looked up at him. "I thought the biggest surprise would be the baby's arrival," she admitted, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "But the real surprise was how my own heart learned to beat for someone else, how it opened again when I thought it was closed." Alejandro cupped her face, tender as a prayer. "Our greatest gift," he agreed. "A family born from fear, sustained by promises, and carried forward by love." He glanced down at his daughter, then back to Valeria. "Whatever comes next, we have this, each other, and the life we've